So the piece I'm working on today is a 2-color brioche triangle. But that's not what I'm talking about. But just this gives you context for why I have another strand of yarn coming off of it while I'm working with 2 different colors. These are center pole cakes. And I'm currently on the front side working in the gold color. And I need to increase here. This needs to be a knit. I'm going to be kind of clumsy. It's difficult knitting with a camera in between my hands. Okay, so this is me starting the slip yarn over pair with the knit 2 together pair. Anyway, so this video is not actually about 2-color brioche. This video is actually about how to advance your project up the needles while you go. Now, did you see what I just did there? I did this with the left hand. I did this with the right hand. I didn't even think about it. Now, when you watch a video of somebody demonstrating a technique, it's usually done over just a handful of stitches. And you're very rarely watching them actually knit for any length of time. And because of that, the yarn is always going to be convenient, already pulled out, no little tangles. The stitches will already be pushed up and front loaded. The other stitches will be pulled back so that there's plenty of room for the new stitches. All of that will have already been set up. And if you do see any of those movements, they're usually very fast and sort of baked in. They're in the interstices between the interstitial space between the actual stitch movements. Like if I do this really slowly to show you the yarn over, slip, knit 2 together, did you see me do this? That was me pushing the needle tip back between the barrel and my fingertip. Because I'm holding on to the stitches here, if I push the needle, the stitches move forward. That's called a tap. Some people do it with their fingertip. I don't do it with my fingertip because I think I trained myself out of that really early, because if you use sharp needles, it ends up making your finger hurt. Anyway, I'm chit-chatting because it's really boring just watching a person knit. And I'm working on something in this case with a really long row. If you can't see what I'm doing, I just tapped again. If you can't see what I'm doing, you can slow it down. I don't always tap. I don't tap with every stitch. There, I just pulled back the right hand stitches again. And I'm front loading the left hand stitches. And I'm taking the opportunity to feed out a little more yarn while I'm at it. These are center pull, but because they've been worked a while, they're pretty loose. So little tangles tend to form in the middle, but they're easy to undo. But it still does mean that every once in a while I have to poke around at my ball. So I'm sitting here knitting this really long row to illustrate what it's like with a really long row. And it seems that I can get 4 to 6 stitches before I have to tap again, because these are loose. I'm working brioche. You see, again, when I looked at it, I not only looked at it, but I pulled all the stitches back, because this is a really long row. There's a lot of stitches on this, is it a 26-inch needle? Maybe 29-inch needle. These are old Susan Bates, I think. They're metal needles, but they've kind of got a glassy enamel finish. So they're not particularly sticky, but they're also dealing with an extremely congested stitch situation. And when stitches are this bunched up on top of each other, they don't like to move. When it's looser like this is fine. And of course, they're moving great over the cable of the needle. But again, watching somebody knit is really kind of dull. But here I am doing a very long row just for you. I'm going to demonstrate when this is done. I'm going to demonstrate a smaller piece in the round. That yarn is a cotton elastic blend, and the number of stitches fits the needle very well. The needle is also a metal needle, so it's not particularly sticky. But the yarn itself, because of the elastic in it, tends to knit at a denser gauge than even the super elastic merino sock yarn. Oh, I have reached my increase point and I nearly missed it. This is my stitch marker. It moved to the back for some reason. Oh, actually, yeah, it moved to the back for some reason. I need to yarn over. I need to knit one, and then I'm yarning over the other way, because if you notice, these are twisted. Anyway, you don't need to know that. Knitting this one, yarn over, knit this one. Okay, so I'm going to finish this row. It's very tedious, showing you how I knit. Very long rows. Let me see. Oops. Yeah, I just screwed up. This is a knit two together. This is a yarn over. Okay. So you notice if I don't have it front loaded, I'm tapping more to get them up, because they're hanging up a little bit here at the join. I'm going to front load them all again. Even if I'm not going to be able to keep all of these front loaded, because this is actually going to start popping back, it tends to loosen up the whole needle because again, there's a lot of work stuck on this needle if I front load it, because that gives more room on the other side to push these down. So I'm going to just get this done. Ho hum. One of the reasons why I decided to do this outside. Oh, fuzz. I'm not gonna bother with that. Oh, that's a splice. One of the reasons why I decided to do this outside, where the wind chimes and the birds and the bright sun are counterpoint, is because watching somebody else knit is a little bit like watching paint dry. And again, just when I needed to pull out more yarn, I also took the opportunity to readjust all my stitches so that I would have more room on the right hand and that all these nicely front-loaded stitches on the left hand work. Whoops, I got interrupted. Alright, so I don't know if you notice, but while I'm knitting, these two fingers hold my needle. This one provides balance, and these two do stuff. So I let go a lot, right? I'm constantly letting go with these two fingers and letting the rest of my hand direct what's going on. That means that eventually too many stitches build up here to move past. Now, depending on how I'm doing the work, if it's like this and the rows are really long, I tend to just let them bunch up, and then after a while, when it gets to be a little crowded, I'll pull them down. And then I take the opportunity to front load again. I don't always do this, and I don't know if you can tell that my left hand is also similarly, it's These fingers are gripping. These are feeding. They're controlling how fast the stitches come out so that they don't sort of pop off the tip when I pull. And another thing, I don't know if it's clear, but I tend to work really far back on the needle. There's a lot of pushing and pulling going on. So I'm going in and then all the way back, which pushes the work into my hand more. So not only does this mean that my stitches tend to be well formed around the needle tip. They're not up here where the needle is narrower, but down here at the barrel. But I'm doing a lot of sort of pushing and pulling with the actual needle on the work. You know, I wonder if I could do this without my four fingers. I can't do it without my left clearly because I'm tensioning with my yarn, but I can do it with my... Oh, this is really uncomfortable. Right? So I can still do it, but it's more secure if I can hold on to it. Anyway, there I tapped again. And now I'm starting to feel a little tension here, so I'm going to feed it out. Front load, push back, and I'm almost to the end of the row. Yeah, it's a little bit awkward knitting with a camera between me and my knitting. Luckily, in this case, I don't have to be quite so close to the camera because I have to show my whole hands for this. And that means I can actually look around the camera to look at my hands instead of having to look at the camera to see what I'm doing. Which is kind of ironic because I don't actually have to watch my hands when I knit. But for some reason, when I'm videotaping myself, I really do prefer watching what I'm doing. Whoops. Okay, just so I fixed that. It was a... yeah, I fixed that. Don't worry about it. I'm going to show you. Okay. It's a different project. I'm working with... So in this case, I'm not working from a center pole ball. I'm working from the outside of this cotton elastic. I don't think they make this anymore. But in this case, because I'm pulling from the outside, it doesn't feed quite as smoothly. It tends to bobble around a little bit. But I think you can tell that I'm using a 16-inch circular needle. It's just perfect for this number of stitches. It's neither bunched up nor tight. The yarn is super springy though, so it's a little weird tensioning it if you haven't done it before. Also, what's really weird about this is that it doesn't really curl. I find that strange. I mean, this is just stockinette. So again, there's not really enough stitches for me to front load. I can front load a little bit. Again, and if I pull back, there's not really very many places for them to go. Also, it's such a short round that when I pull back like this, I get stopped by the actual needle. Again, metal needles. I prefer working with nylon needles, but these were the free ones I had at the time in the right length and size. You can I'm tapping quite frequently with this one because due to the grippy nature of the yarn, not because cotton is grippy, it's not, but the elastic makes the stitches tighter. I tend to tap more. Also, I keep pulling the stitches off the needle because the needles are actually decently slick, which is kind of annoying, so I have to go back and open them up again from the other side. But again, I've front loaded. And then, because these stitches are also smaller, the fabric is thinner, the other fabric, because it's a brioche, it goes really fast with all that slipping and yarn overing. But it is basically twice the amount of yarn per stitch. So when I load it up into my right hand, it fills up a lot faster. But yeah, I'm tapping a lot. I didn't realize how much I tapped until I started working with this yarn, and then I realized, yeah, I tap all the time. Maybe it's because I can hear myself do it with these metal needles, but I don't know. Anyway, here's my stitch marker, just to mark the start around. I don't really need it, but I like having it. It makes me feel, when it's this much stockinette, and I don't really have to pay attention to what I'm doing, the stitch marker makes me feel like I'm making progress. Again, I keep slipping the stitches instead of working them. I think that's an effect of the slippery needle with the slippery yarn, which is nonetheless grippy because of the tension. Okay, this is sort of filled up, so I'm going to move them down. So I'm going to feed more yarn. That all ends up being, and then right before I pick it up again, you just see I front load. Don't even have to think about it. All of these motions are automatic. So this is my average knitting speed, I think. And this is how I knit that kind of brainless knitting that you just sort of sit in front of the TV, or you're, you know, on a phone call or something, and you're doing, you know, anytime I pause, immediately, if I'm looking at it, I spread it out on my right hand because I'm looking at the work below, right? You know, all of these little things that I do sort of, again, I just front loaded. They're all automatic. They're prep work that I don't even have to think about. Again, my hand, right hand, left hand, tapping. Okay, now I don't know if you noticed what I just did there. I felt it, and I'm thinking about it. So what I did was, you see how these stitches are building up on my left hand? What I just did, which you couldn't see because it's the last few fingers, is I didn't actually pull down. What I did was, as I was doing this, right, I let go with these fingers, just a little bit. And because there was enough fabric bunched here, they all sort of loosened up and pushed a few of the stitches down. So if I'm not aggressively pulling it back, it will still proceed and not fill up my right hand that much. If I feel the tension of too many stitches building up in my right hand, I will automatically, and I did this, I didn't think about it until after I did it, I will automatically loosen up my right hand. Let me see if I can get this to do it again. I just did it. I lifted this finger, not this finger. I lifted just one, and it was enough to push a few stitches down. This is all sort of subconscious. It's just things that I have learned to do. I keep doing it. There's these stitches sitting on my needle, you know, they're bunched up on my right hand needle, and these fingers go, oh, I need to move them down, I'll loosen up, and then just the natural process of knitting pushes them down a little bit because there's room for them. This needle isn't overloaded, there's no bunched up stitches sitting in front of them preventing them from moving down the needle, so they just move. And I'm back around again. I'm going to keep going for a little bit longer to maybe, hopefully, show this better, because this project I don't tend to front load as much, which is why I tap more. I think you can see how much I'm tapping now if I'm not front loading. And then See how they're building up in this hand? I'm pretty sure you can't tell, and I don't think I can shift enough to make it obvious. No, I don't think that'll work either. I keep moving these fingers a little bit, just lifting them up, not all at the same time, but just sort of shifting my grip a little bit with them, which I can do when my forefinger and thumb are gripping the front, because, yeah, I just did it again. I just lifted them past a lump. There was this little fold, and I could feel it like hanging up on my finger, so I just moved my finger in front of it, and that pushed it down. So all of these motions are subconscious, but they're very, very critical to moving the yarn down the needle, the stitches down the needle. They're the things I would do if I were consciously thinking about it, but I don't need to consciously think about it. All I need to do is react to the stimuli, which is pressure against my fingers saying, you know, these stitches are bunching up, you need more room. There's no room for the new stitches to go there anymore. Do something. And then I move my finger. And that big fold of yarn moves out of the way. So I think I'm gonna end this when I get back to the stitch marker. But really, the only way you see this part of knitting, this sort of sustained process, is if you watch somebody do the sustained process. And again, unless you're knitting too, or you're trying to learn something, it's like watching paint dry. And even then, I'm not knitting particularly slowly, so if you were trying to learn how to do the knit stitch, and I keep slipping them by accident instead of knitting them, it's probably not the greatest time to do so. This is not about teaching how to knit the knit stitch or knit two-color brioche. This is all about how I, at least, advance my knitting. And then back at the start. Now again, this is the tap, the way I tap, right? I don't push with my fingertip. I hold it here and I push it down. And, okay. Because pushing it against the barrel, it does push into my fingertip a little bit, but it distributes the pressure a little bit, and I'm not as likely to poke a hole in my hand.